What if I told you that every single night while you sleep, your subconscious mind becomes a master alchemist, transforming the lead of your limitations into the gold of your desires? And what if the 8 hours you spend unconscious hold more manifesting power than the 16 hours you spend awake? And what if tonight could be the night when everything changes? Not because you learned something new, but because you remembered something ancient that Florence Scovel Shinn discovered in 1923, when she realized that the sleeping mind is God's workshop. And while you rest, the universe rearranges itself according to your deepest declarations. You see, most people think that manifestation happens during the day, when they are working and striving and pushing against reality. But Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the real magic happens in the darkness, when your conscious mind stops interfering and your subconscious mind begins its sacred work of alchemy. And tonight I will share with you the exact formula she used to turn dreams into gold and thoughts into treasures. And if you have been struggling with lack or limitation, or if you have been trying so hard to make things happen during your waking hours, then this teaching will change everything, because you are about to discover that your greatest power has been lying dormant every single night, waiting for you to activate it. Her name was Diane, and she was 53 years old when she first learned about dream alchemy, and she lived in a small apartment in Columbus, Ohio, where the rent was $847 every month, and she had been struggling to make ends meet for the past 2 years. Ever since her divorce left her with only $1,700 in savings and a part-time job at a local bookstore that paid her $11.50 per hour for 24 hours each week, which meant she was earning barely enough to cover her basic expenses, and nothing was left over for the dreams she had carried in her heart since childhood. It was 11:37 on a Tuesday night in October when Diane discovered Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching about the power of the sleeping mind, and she had been lying in bed worrying about how she would pay next month's rent, because her hours at the bookstore had been cut to 18 per week, and her savings account had dwindled down to $213, and she felt like she was drowning in a sea of financial anxiety. And every night when she closed her eyes instead of rest, she found only more worry and more fear and more thoughts spinning round and round like a washing machine that never stopped. The apartment was cold that night because she had turned the thermostat down to 62 degrees to save money on heating, and she could hear the October wind rattling the windows, and somewhere in the distance a dog was barking, and the smell of her neighbor's cigarette smoke was seeping through the thin walls, and she was wearing her old blue flannel pajamas that had tiny holes near the elbows, and her feet were cold despite the thick socks she wore, and she was lying on her back, staring at the ceiling where a small water stain had appeared the week before, and wondering how she would afford to fix that too. Diane had always been someone who believed in spiritual things, but she had never really understood how to apply spiritual principles to her everyday life, and she had grown up in a Methodist family in small town Ohio, where her father worked at the steel mill for 37 years, and her mother stayed home to raise 4 children, and money was always tight, but somehow they always managed, and she remembered her grandmother saying that God would provide, but she had never really understood what that meant in practical terms, especially when the bills kept coming and the bank account kept shrinking. That Tuesday night, she had been scrolling through videos on her phone trying to distract herself from her financial worries when she stumbled across a teaching about Florence Scovel Shinn, and the narrator was explaining how Scovel Shinn had discovered that the subconscious mind works most powerfully during sleep, and that by programming specific thoughts and declarations into the mind just before sleeping, a person could literally transform their entire reality within 48 hours. And Diane felt something stir inside her chest, like a tiny flame being lit in a dark room. The teaching explained that Florence Scovel Shinn had worked with hundreds of people in New York City in the 1920s and 30s, and she had discovered that the last thought held in consciousness before sleep becomes the first seed planted in the subconscious, and that the subconscious mind works all night long like a master gardener, tending and watering and nurturing that seed until it grows into a full manifestation in the physical world. And the narrator said that Scovel Shinn called this process dream alchemy. because it literally transforms base thoughts into golden reality. Diane felt skeptical at first because she had tried affirmations before and vision boards and gratitude lists, and nothing seemed to work, and she had almost given up on the idea that her life could really change. But something about this teaching felt different, and she decided that she had nothing to lose and everything to gain. So she put down her phone and closed her eyes, and she began to speak very quietly into the darkness. Following the instruction she had just heard, she began by stating her identity, and she whispered, "I am a woman who always has more than enough money." And then she declared the completed reality by saying, "My financial worries are completely resolved and money flows to me easily and abundantly." And then she created a vivid mental image of herself waking up the next morning and checking her bank account and seeing thousands of dollars deposited overnight. And she held this image in her mind as she drifted off to sleep at 12:43 in the morning. What happened next still amazes Diane to this day, because when she woke up the following morning at 7:15, she felt different in a way she could not explain. And instead of the usual dread and anxiety that typically greeted her upon waking, she felt a strange sense of calm and expectancy. And she made her coffee and sat at her small kitchen table, and for some reason she felt compelled to check her email, which was unusual because she normally avoided her computer in the morning, knowing it would only bring bills and stress. In her inbox, she found a message from her cousin Jennifer, who lived in Phoenix, Arizona. And Jennifer explained that she was starting a new online business, selling handmade jewelry, and she needed someone to help her manage customer service and handle orders, and she was offering to pay $15 per hour for 30 hours per week, which would be $450 every week, and she could work completely from home using her own computer. And Jennifer said she had thought of Diane immediately because she remembered how organized and reliable Diane had always been. Diane stared at the email for several minutes, not quite believing what she was reading, because this job offer would give her $1,800 per month, which was more than double what she was making at the bookstore, and it would allow her to work from home, which meant no gas money and no dry cleaning costs and no stress of commuting. And she quickly calculated that after her rent and basic expenses, she would have almost $900 left over each month, which was more financial freedom than she had experienced in years. But that was just the beginning, because at 2:37 that afternoon, while she was working her shift at the bookstore, her manager approached her and explained that the owner had decided to give all employees a bonus because the store had had an unexpectedly profitable quarter. And Diane's bonus was $375, which would be added to her next paycheck, and she felt like she was living in a dream, because less than 24 hours ago, she had been worried about paying rent. And now opportunities were flowing to her from multiple directions. That evening at 6:29, Diane was walking to her car after her shift when she noticed something shiny on the ground near the passenger door, and when she bent down to look, she discovered it was a lottery ticket that someone had dropped, and something told her to pick it up and check the numbers. And when she used the scanner at the nearby convenience store, she discovered that the ticket was worth $50, and the cashier explained that someone had purchased it the day before, but must have dropped it without realizing they had won. By the time Diane went to bed, that second night, she had received a job offer worth $1,800 per month, plus a bonus of $375 plus $50 in lottery winnings, and the total value of what had flowed to her in less than 24 hours was $2,225. And she understood for the first time that her 8 hours of sleep had been more productive than any 8 hours she had ever spent awake. From that night forward, Diane began practicing dream alchemy every single evening, and she programmed her subconscious with declarations of abundance and love and health and creativity, and within 3 months, her entire life had transformed, and she was earning more money than she had ever dreamed possible. And she had met a wonderful man named Frank, who treated her with kindness and respect, and her health had improved dramatically, and she felt like she was living the life she had always imagined but never dared to hope for. But what made Diane's transformation even more remarkable was how effortless it became once she understood the principle behind dream alchemy, and she no longer had to struggle or force or push against reality. because she had learned to work with the natural laws of manifestation instead of against them. And every night as she prepared for sleep, she would feel a sense of excitement, knowing that her subconscious was about to go to work on her behalf, creating opportunities and synchronicities and miracles that her conscious mind could never have imagined. The key that Diane discovered was that the subconscious mind does not distinguish between what is real and what is vividly imagined. And so, when she created detailed mental pictures of her desired reality and combined them with strong positive emotions and clear declarations of truth, her subconscious accepted these images as facts and began to rearrange her external circumstances to match her internal programming. And this is why Florence Scovel Shinn called it alchemy, because it literally transmutes the base metal of limitation into the gold of unlimited possibility. What amazed Diane most was how quickly the process worked once she stopped doubting and second-guessing herself, and she realized that her previous failures with manifestation techniques had not been because the techniques did not work, but because she had been using them inconsistently and with divided attention and conflicted emotions. But Dream Alchemy was different because it bypassed the conscious mind entirely and worked directly with the deeper levels of consciousness that have the power to reshape reality itself. 6 months after beginning her practice of Dream Alchemy, Diane had not only resolved her financial struggles, but had actually manifested a level of abundance that exceeded her wildest dreams. And she was earning over $4,000 per month from multiple income streams. And she had moved into a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment with a view of the river. And she had established an emergency fund of $12,000, and she was even planning a vacation to Europe, something she had never thought possible on her previous income. The relationship with Frank had also blossomed in ways that surprised and delighted her, because she had used Dream Alchemy not just for money but for love. And she had programmed her subconscious with images of herself in a loving, supportive partnership with a man who cherished and respected her. And Frank turned out to be exactly the kind of person she had envisioned, and their relationship felt natural and easy and joyful. From the very beginning, as if they had been meant to find each other. Most importantly, Diane discovered that Dream Alchemy had given her something more valuable than money or love, and that was an unshakable faith in her own power to create the life she desired, and she no longer felt like a victim of circumstances or a prisoner of her past, but instead, she felt like a conscious co-creator with the universe, and she knew that whatever challenges might arise in the future, she now had the tools and the knowledge to transform them into opportunities for growth and expansion. Now, if this teaching resonates with you, and if you feel you were guided here, then touch the subscribe button now. And it is not for me, but it is so that you receive each new teaching from Florence Scovel Shinn at the exact moment your soul needs it. And I want you to know that there are thousands of people around the world who are part of this community and who practice these principles every single day. And when you subscribe, you become part of a collective field of manifestation that amplifies the power of these teachings for everyone. And in the comments, write only 3 words, which are, I am receiving now. And this is not an affirmation, but a decree. And when you write these words, you activate collective witness, and thousands of souls write these same words, and the field strengthens for everyone. And I want you to understand that the moment you write those 3 words, you are no longer practicing alone, but you are connected to a worldwide network of dreamers and manifestors and alchemists who support each other through the power of shared intention. If you choose not to do this right now, that is perfectly fine, and your path is your own, but know that this is the moment of greatest power. So do it. If you feel aligned, and if something inside you is saying yes, then trust that inner voice, because it is your higher self calling you toward your highest good. And remember that every person who has ever transformed their life through these teachings started with a single moment of decision, just like the one you are facing right now. Now you can relax completely, and you do not need to do anything except listen and allow these words to enter the deepest layers of your consciousness. And everything I will share enters you while you rest, and your subconscious is awake, and it absorbs every word. And if you fall asleep in the middle, that is perfect, because when you wake, the seed will already be planted. and growing and blooming into your new reality. Close your eyes now if you have not already done so, and allow your breathing to slow down and deepen. And know that you are safe and supported, and that tonight your own dream alchemy begins. And you are about to discover that the 8 hours you spend sleeping are the most powerful 8 hours of your entire day, and everything that needs to happen will happen while you rest. Florence Scovel Shinn was born in 1865 in Camden, New Jersey, and she grew up in a world where women were expected to be wives and mothers and nothing more. But Florence felt called to something greater, and she moved to New York City in her early 20s to pursue a career as an illustrator and writer. And it was there in the bustling energy of Manhattan that she began to discover the spiritual principles that would later transform millions of lives around the world. She was a small woman with piercing blue eyes and prematurely gray hair that she wore pulled back in a simple bun, and she had a way of speaking that was both gentle and commanding. And people were drawn to her because she possessed an unusual combination of practical wisdom and mystical insight. And she understood that most people were struggling, not because they lacked ability or intelligence, but because they had never been taught how to work with the invisible laws that govern manifestation. In the early 1900s, Florence began studying metaphysical principles, and she was particularly drawn to the idea that thoughts create reality, and that words have the power to transform circumstances, and she spent years experimenting with different techniques and approaches. And she worked with everyone from wealthy socialites to struggling immigrants. And what she discovered was that the most powerful transformations happened not during the day when people were actively trying to manifest, but during the night when the conscious mind was quiet and the subconscious could do its work. Florence Scovel Shinn discovered that the subconscious mind never sleeps, and it works all night, rearranging your world according to the last clear thought you impressed upon it before sleep. And she realized that most people were programming their subconscious with worry and fear and anxiety, and then wondering why their lives were filled with struggle and limitation. And she began teaching people how to use their 8 hours of sleep as a laboratory for transformation. And she called this Process Dream Alchemy, because it literally transforms the lead of limiting beliefs into the gold of unlimited abundance. She wrote in her journal in 1923 that the sleeping hours are when the soul does its greatest work and the wise person learns to plant golden seeds in the garden of the subconscious before retiring each night. And she developed a specific formula that she called Dream Alchemy, which involved 3 steps that had to be performed in exact sequence just before sleep. And she discovered that when people followed this formula consistently, their lives began to transform in ways that seemed miraculous, but were actually the natural result of working with spiritual law. The 3 steps of dream alchemy that Florence taught were deceptively simple, but profoundly powerful. And the first step was to declare your true spiritual identity as a being of infinite abundance and love and health. And you had to speak this declaration aloud with conviction and feeling. And the second step was to state your desired reality as if it had already been accomplished using present tense language and vivid sensory details. And the third step was to create a detailed mental movie of yourself living in the fulfilled condition and to hold this image in your mind as you drifted into sleep. Florence discovered that the power of this technique lay not in the individual steps, but in the precise sequence and timing, because the moments just before sleep are when the conscious mind relaxes its grip on reality, and the subconscious becomes most receptive to new programming. And if you could implant the right images and declarations into your subconscious at this crucial moment, then your sleeping mind would work all night to bring these visions into physical manifestation. His name was Gary, and he was 61 years old when he first encountered Florence Scovel Shinn's teachings about dream alchemy, and he was living in a boarding house on the Lower East Side of Manhattan and paying $7.50 per week for a small room with a narrow bed and a single window that looked out onto an alley where garbage cans overflowed and cats fought over scraps of food, and the smell of cabbage and onions from the kitchen downstairs permeated everything. Gary had come to New York from a small farm in Pennsylvania after his father died and left the family land to his older brother, and he had hoped to make his fortune in the city. but after 2 years of searching, he had found only temporary work-loading trucks at the docks for 50 cents per day when ships were in port, and sometimes he worked only 2 or 3 days per week, and he was constantly worried about how he would pay for his room and his meals, and he had written to his family asking for help, but they were struggling too and had nothing to spare. It was a cold February evening in 1924 when Gary attended one of Florence Scovel Shinn's lectures at a small metaphysical church on West 23rd Street, and he had only gone because the lecture was free and the church was warm and he had nowhere else to spend the evening, and he sat in the back row wearing his only good shirt, which had been mended several times, and his coat that was threadbare at the elbows. And he listened skeptically as this well-dressed woman talked about the power of the mind to create prosperity. Florence stood at the front of the room wearing a simple black dress with a white collar, and she spoke without notes in a voice that was clear and confident. And she began by saying, "Every man and woman in this room has been given the power to transform their circumstances through the proper use of their sleeping hours. But most of you are using this power in reverse and creating the very conditions you wish to avoid." She explained that the subconscious mind is like a faithful servant that works tirelessly to bring into manifestation whatever command it receives, and that most people give their subconscious commands of lack and limitation and fear, and then they wonder why their lives are filled with struggle. And she said, "Your subconscious does not judge whether your commands are good or bad. It simply obeys. And if you fall asleep thinking about your problems and your limitations, then your subconscious will work all night to create more problems and more limitations." Gary felt something stir inside his chest as he listened to these words, because he realized that every night for the past 2 years he had fallen asleep, worrying about money and work and his uncertain future, and he had been programming his subconscious with images of poverty and failure, and now he understood why his circumstances seemed to get worse instead of better. Despite his hard work and good intentions, Florence continued by explaining the 3-step formula for dream alchemy, and she said, "First, you must declare your true identity as a child of infinite abundance, and you must speak this declaration aloud just before sleep. And second, you must state the completed reality as if it has already happened, and you must feel the truth of these words in your body. And third, you must create a vivid mental image of yourself living in the fulfilled condition, and you must hold this image as you drift into sleep." She then told the story of a young woman who had come to her completely destitute and homeless and sleeping in Central Park, and how this woman had applied the dream alchemy formula for 30 consecutive nights, and by the end of that month she had been offered a job as a governess for a wealthy family on Fifth Avenue, earning $25 per week plus room and board, and within 6 months she had saved enough money to bring her sister from Ireland and start a small business selling beautiful handmade lace. As Gary listened to this story, he felt hope stirring in his heart for the first time in months, and when Florence asked if anyone in the audience was willing to commit to practicing dream alchemy for 30 consecutive nights, Gary raised his hand along with about a dozen other people, and Florence looked directly at him and said, "Young man, your willingness to try is the first seed of your transformation." That night, Gary returned to his small room in the boarding house, and for the first time, instead of falling asleep while worrying about tomorrow, he followed the 3-step formula that Florence had taught. And first, he declared aloud, "I am a man who is always provided for, and opportunities flow to me easily." And then he stated, "My perfect work has found me, and I am earning abundant income doing something I love." And finally, he created a vivid image of himself dressed in fine clothes, walking into a beautiful office where he was respected and valued and well paid. The next morning, Gary woke at 5:30 as usual, but instead of the heavy feeling of dread that normally accompanied his awakening, he felt a strange lightness and optimism. And as he walked to the docks hoping to find work, noticed things he had never seen before, like the way the morning light reflected off the windows of the tall buildings and the sound of birds singing in the small trees that lined some of the streets, and he felt like he was seeing the city with new eyes. When Gary arrived at the docks, the foreman told him that a regular position had opened up working in the warehouse organizing inventory, and the job paid 75 cents per day for 6 days per week, which was more steady income than Gary ever had. And when he asked why he was being considered for this better position, the foreman said, "You seem different today, more confident and reliable, and I have a good feeling about you." Gary continued practicing the dream alchemy formula every single night for 30 consecutive nights, just as he had promised Florence. And during that month, his life began to change in ways that seemed magical, but which Florence had assured him were simply the natural result of programming the subconscious with positive commands instead of negative ones. And by the end of the month, Gary had been promoted to assistant warehouse manager with a salary of $22 per week. But more importantly, Gary discovered that his entire relationship with life had shifted. And instead of feeling like a victim of circumstances, he felt like a co-creator with the universe, and he began to see opportunities everywhere, and he developed friendships with his co-workers, and he even met a lovely woman named Rose, who worked at the bakery near his boarding house, and who smiled at him every morning when he stopped to buy his breakfast roll, and who had the most beautiful brown eyes and a laugh that reminded him of music. 6 months after that first lecture, Gary had saved enough money to move into a decent apartment with running water and electric lights, and a real kitchen where he could cook his own meals, and he had been promoted again to head of warehouse operations, earning $38 per week, which was more money than his father had ever made at the farm. And he had proposed to Rose, and she had said yes, and they were planning a wedding for the following spring. And Gary often marveled at how his life had completely transformed simply by changing the last thoughts he held in his mind before sleep. The transformation in Gary was so dramatic that other men at the docks began asking him what had changed. And he would tell them about Florence Scovel Shinn and the power of dream alchemy, and some of them thought he was talking nonsense, but a few were desperate enough to try anything. And those who committed to the practice for 30 consecutive nights found that their own lives began to shift in remarkable ways. And word spread through the immigrant community about this woman who taught people how to use their sleeping hours to create prosperity. Gary's story became one of Florence's most powerful examples because it demonstrated that dream alchemy worked regardless of a person's background, or education, or social status. And here was a simple farm boy with no formal schooling who had transformed his life completely through the consistent application of spiritual principle. And Gary himself became an evangelist for the teaching. And he would often say that the most important thing he had learned was that every person has the same power to reshape their reality, but most people never learn how to use it. What made Gary's success even more remarkable was that he had started from a position of complete desperation, with no money and no connections and no apparent opportunities. But within 6 months, he had created a life of abundance and meaning and love. And this proved Florence's central teaching that external circumstances are always secondary to internal programming, and that anyone who learns to work with the laws of the subconscious mind can overcome any limitation and create any reality they desire. The wedding of Gary and Rose took place on a beautiful Sunday morning in May of 1925, and Florence Scovel Shinn was invited as a guest of honor, and as she watched this young couple exchange vows, she felt deep satisfaction knowing that she had played a small part in bringing them together by teaching Gary how to transform his consciousness and therefore his life. And in her speech at the reception, she reminded everyone that love and prosperity are not scarce resources to be competed for, but infinite gifts that flow naturally to those who align themselves with spiritual law. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that your last thought before sleep becomes your first reality upon waking, because the subconscious mind takes that final impression and works with it all night long like a master craftsman shaping raw material into a finished creation. And she said that most people waste this precious time by falling asleep with worry or fear or resentment in their minds. And then they wonder why they wake up feeling tired and discouraged, and why their days are filled with problems and setbacks. She explained that the sleeping mind is like a garden, and whatever seeds you plant just before sleep will grow and multiply during the night. And if you plant seeds of abundance and joy and love, then you will wake up in a field of flowers, But if you plant seeds of lack and fear and anger, then you will wake up in a field of weeds and thorns, and the choice is always yours, and it is made new every single night. The principle that Florence Scovel Shinn discovered is that the subconscious mind is most receptive to suggestion in the moments just before sleep, when the conscious mind is relaxing its control, and during the sleep state itself, when the analytical mind is quiet, and the deeper levels of consciousness are open and active. And this is why she called it dream alchemy, because it literally transforms the base metal of limiting thoughts into the gold of unlimited possibility. While you sleep, your subconscious reorders reality according to the decree you have given. And this is not metaphor but actual spiritual law, and the wise person learns to use this law consciously and deliberately instead of accidentally and destructively. And tonight, as you continue to listen to these words, your own subconscious is already beginning to accept new programming and new possibilities. And you do not need to force this process, but simply allow it to unfold naturally. And this principle I just shared is only the first layer. And in the next hours, I will reveal how this teaching unfolds in 7 different dimensions, and you can fall asleep because each word will enter you. And your subconscious is listening even when your conscious mind wanders, and everything that you need to receive will be received. And tomorrow when you wake, you will find that seeds have been planted that will grow into a garden of golden dreams made manifest. While you rest now, your subconscious is already beginning to accept the new programming, and you can feel something shifting deep within. Your consciousness and what you are about to learn is the most closely guarded secret of the ancient alchemists and the mystics and the magicians of old. And that secret is that the human mind during sleep becomes a furnace of transmutation more powerful than any laboratory ever built by human hands. And Florence Scovel Shinn discovered that the sleep state activates what she called the divine chemistry. And during the deepest phases of sleep, your consciousness literally rearranges the molecular structure of your reality. The word transmutation means to change one substance into another, and the medieval alchemists spent their entire lives trying to turn lead into gold using external fire and chemicals and elaborate apparatus. But what they never understood is that the true furnace of transmutation exists within every human being, and it operates automatically every single night while you sleep. And the fuel for this furnace is not coal or wood or gas, but pure consciousness programmed with specific intentions and declarations and images of desired reality. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that during the rapid eye movement phase of sleep, which scientists now know occurs approximately every 90 minutes throughout the night, your subconscious mind enters what she called the alchemical state. And in this state, the normal laws of physical reality become fluid and malleable, and your consciousness gains the power to reshape circumstances and events and relationships according to the blueprint you have impressed upon it just before sleep. And this is why she always emphasized that the last thought before sleep is the most important thought of your entire day. Her name was Sharon, and she was 59 years old when she discovered the true power of the nocturnal furnace, and she lived alone in a small house in Tucson, Arizona, that she had inherited from her mother 3 years earlier, and the house needed thousands of dollars worth of repairs that Sharon simply did not have. And the roof leaked in 7 different places, and the plumbing was failing, and the electrical system was so old that she was afraid to use more than one appliance at a time. And her monthly Social Security check of $937 barely covered her basic expenses. It was 2:23 on a Wednesday morning in March when Sharon first learned about the transmutation power of sleep, and she had been lying awake worrying about a notice she had received from the city, stating that her property was not in compliance with housing codes, and that if the necessary repairs were not completed within 60 days, the house would be condemned, and she would be forced to move, and she had no idea where she would go because her income was too low to qualify for decent rental housing, and her savings account contained exactly $168. The bedroom was chilly because the heater had broken the week before, and she could not afford to repair it, and she was wearing her warmest flannel nightgown and had pulled 3 blankets over herself. But she was still cold, and she could hear the wind howling outside and the sound of rain dripping steadily into the metal bucket she had placed under the worst leak in the living room ceiling, and the smell of mildew was everywhere because of the moisture damage, and she felt overwhelmed by the enormity of her problems. Sharon had worked as a school secretary for 32 years before retiring, and she had always been a practical person who solved problems through hard work and careful planning. But this situation seemed impossible because no amount of effort could create the $15,000 she needed for home repairs, and she had already applied for assistance from every social service agency in the county and had been told that there were no programs available for her particular situation, and she felt trapped and hopeless and alone. That Wednesday morning, she had been listening to a late-night radio program about metaphysical healing when the host began discussing Florence Scovel Shinn's teachings about the power of sleep transmutation. And the host explained that the subconscious mind during sleep has the ability to rearrange not just thoughts and emotions, but actual physical circumstances, and that many people had used this principle to manifest money and healing and opportunities in ways that seemed miraculous, but were actually the natural result of working with higher spiritual laws. The radio host told the story of a woman who had programmed her sleep for 43 consecutive nights with images of her dream home and specific declarations about living in beauty and abundance. And by the end of those 43 days, she had inherited a house from a distant relative she had never met, and Sharon felt something stir inside her chest because this story gave her hope that maybe her situation was not as hopeless as it seemed, and maybe there were solutions available that her conscious mind had not yet considered. Following the instructions she heard on the radio, Sharon began that very night to practice what Florence Scovel Shinn called furnace transmutation. And just before sleep, she would speak aloud to her subconscious saying, "My perfect home is now manifested, and all necessary resources flow to me easily." And then she would create a detailed mental image of herself living in a beautifully restored house with a new roof and modern plumbing and updated electrical systems and fresh paint on every wall, and she would hold this image as she drifted into sleep. The first night Sharon practiced this technique, she noticed that her sleep was deeper and more restful than it had been in months. And instead of waking up multiple times with worry and anxiety, she slept through the night for the first time since receiving the notice from the city. And when she woke up at 6:45 in the morning, she felt refreshed and optimistic in a way that surprised her, because nothing in her external circumstances had changed, yet something inside her felt fundamentally different. On the third day of practicing furnace transmutation, Sharon received an unexpected phone call from her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who lived 2 houses down the street. And Mrs. Rodriguez explained that her son Carlos was a contractor who specialized in home restoration, and that he had noticed Sharon's house needed work, and he was offering to do all the necessary repairs in exchange for being allowed to use Sharon's house as a showcase for his business, and he would document the entire restoration process for his portfolio and website. Sharon could hardly believe what she was hearing, because this offer would solve all her problems without requiring any money from her. And when she met with Carlos the following day, he explained that he was trying to build his reputation in historic home restoration. And Sharon's house was exactly the type of project that would demonstrate his skills, and he estimated that the work would take approximately 6 weeks and would include everything needed to bring the house up to code, plus many additional improvements. But Carlos's offer was just the beginning, because as the restoration work progressed, Sharon began to notice other positive changes flowing into her life, and her neighbor across the street offered to pay her $50 per week to take care of her small dog while she was at work, and another neighbor asked Sharon to help organize her late mother's estate and offered to pay her $25 per hour for 15 hours per week. And suddenly, Sharon had additional income of $275 per week. During the 4th week of the restoration project, Carlos mentioned that he was looking for someone to handle the administrative side of his growing business, and he offered Sharon a part-time position, answering phones and scheduling appointments and managing paperwork for $18 per hour and 20 hours per week, which would give her an additional $360 per week. And for the first time in years, Sharon felt financially secure and able to plan for the future. The transformation in Sharon's life was so dramatic that she began to understand what Florence Scovel Shinn meant when she wrote about the furnace of transmutation. And Sharon realized that her subconscious mind had literally melted down her circumstances of lack and limitation and reformed them into abundance and opportunity. And the amazing thing was that this had all happened while she slept and without any conscious effort or struggle on her part. As the restoration of her house neared completion, Sharon marveled at how beautiful her home had become. And Carlos and his crew had not only fixed everything that was broken, but had added many touches that made the house feel like a magazine showcase. And there was new hardwood flooring and granite countertops in the kitchen, and a completely renovated bathroom with a clawfoot tub, and the entire house had been painted in warm, welcoming colors that made every room feel cozy and inviting. Sharon's story illustrates the principle that Florence Scovel Shinn discovered about the nocturnal furnace. And during the deepest phases of sleep, your subconscious mind works like a master alchemist, taking the raw materials of your current circumstances and transmuting them into the gold of your desired reality. And this process happens automatically every night, but most people never learn how to fuel the furnace with the right materials, and instead they accidentally program it with worry and fear and limitation. The key to successful transmutation is understanding that your subconscious mind during sleep operates according to different laws than your conscious mind during waking hours. And while your conscious mind deals with linear time and physical limitations, your subconscious mind has access to what Florence called divine time and divine resources, and it can orchestrate synchronicities and opportunities and solutions that would be impossible to create through conscious effort alone. Florence taught that the furnace of transmutation requires 3 types of fuel to operate at maximum efficiency. And the first fuel is clear intention expressed through specific declarations spoken aloud just before sleep. And the second fuel is vivid imagination that creates detailed sensory images of the desired outcome. And the third fuel is emotional conviction that accepts the desired reality as already accomplished. And when these 3 fuels are combined correctly, the subconscious furnace can transmute any situation, no matter how challenging it appears. What makes the sleep state so powerful for transmutation is that during sleep, the conscious mind, with all its doubts and fears and logical objections, becomes quiet, and the subconscious is free to work without interference. And this is why Florence always said that the most important work happens in the darkness when you are not watching and not judging and not trying to control the process. And your only job is to program the furnace correctly and then allow it to do its work. The scientific explanation for why sleep transmutation works so effectively is that during REM sleep, the brain enters a heightened state of neuroplasticity where new neural pathways can be formed more easily than during waking consciousness. And when you program specific thoughts and images into your mind just before sleep, these thoughts literally rewire your brain during the night and create new patterns of perception and behavior that naturally lead to different external results. Sharon discovered that the key to maintaining her new abundance was to continue using the furnace of transmutation every single night, and she programmed her sleep not just with images of material prosperity, but with declarations of health and love and creativity and purpose. And she found that as long as she consistently fed the furnace with positive programming, her life continued to improve in all areas, and she felt like she was living in a completely different world than the one she had inhabited just a few months earlier. And while you rest now, your own furnace of transmutation is already beginning to warm up, and you can feel the heat of transformation starting to build in your consciousness. And tonight, when you fall asleep, you will be feeding this furnace with the golden fuel of unlimited possibility. And when you wake tomorrow morning, something will have shifted in your reality because the lead of limitation is already being melted down and reformed into the gold of abundance. The ancient alchemists knew that successful transmutation required the perfect combination of 3 sacred substances, and they called these substances sulfur and mercury and salt. But they were not talking about the physical elements, but about spiritual principles that must be blended in precise proportions to create the philosopher's stone and Florence Scovel Shinn discovered that these same three substances exist within human consciousness, and when they are properly combined just before sleep, they create the most powerful manifesting force in the universe. Florence taught that the first alchemical substance is identity, which corresponds to the alchemical principle of sulfur. And this is the fundamental truth of who you are in divine mind. An identity must always be declared in present tense using the words I am, because these are the most creative words in any language. And when you speak your true spiritual identity aloud just before sleep, you are giving your subconscious mind the basic blueprint for how to reorganize your reality. And everything that follows must be consistent with the identity you have claimed. The second alchemical substance is declaration, which corresponds to the principle of Mercury. And this is the completed reality, stated as an accomplished fact, using words like, it is done, or I have, or I receive. And the declaration must be specific and detailed and expressed with absolute certainty. And when you speak your declaration into the darkness just before sleep, you are commanding your subconscious mind to accept this reality as true and to begin immediately rearranging circumstances to match your words. The third alchemical substance is vision, which corresponds to the principle of salt, and this is the detailed sensory image of yourself living in the fulfilled condition. And the vision must include not just what you would see, but what you would hear and feel and smell and taste, and the emotional state you would experience. And when you create this vision in your mind just before sleep, you are providing your subconscious with the complete template for manifestation and giving it specific instructions for how to rebuild your world. His name was Kenneth, and he was 64 years old when he learned how to blend the three alchemical substances. And he had been divorced for 8 years and living alone in a small apartment in Portland, Oregon, and paying $1,200 per month in rent from his Social Security and pension, which left him with very little money for anything else. And he felt lonely and disconnected from life, and he had almost given up on the possibility of finding love. At his age, Kenneth had been married for 26 years to a woman named Linda, who left him when she fell in love with her personal trainer, and the divorce had been bitter and expensive and had left Kenneth feeling rejected and unwanted and convinced that no woman would ever want to be with him again. And for 8 years, he had lived as a hermit, rarely leaving his apartment except to buy groceries and go to doctor appointments. And he spent most of his time watching television and reading mystery novels and feeling sorry for himself. It was 7:31 on a Thursday evening in September when Kenneth attended a free lecture at the community center about Florence Scovel Shinn's teachings on love and relationships, and he had only gone because he was bored. And the lecture was within walking distance of his apartment, and he sat in the back row wearing his old gray sweater that had moth holes in the sleeves and his worn brown pants that were too loose because he had lost weight from poor eating habits. And he listened skeptically as the speaker explained how the three alchemical substances could be used to manifest perfect love. The speaker was a cheerful woman in her 70s named Dorothy, who had been studying Florence Scovel Shinn's work for 40 years. And she explained that loneliness is not a permanent condition, but simply the result of programming the subconscious mind with thoughts of separation and abandonment. And she said that any person, regardless of age or appearance or past history, could use the three alchemical substances to draw their perfect partner into their life. And Kenneth felt something stir inside his chest because her words gave him hope he had not felt in years. Dorothy explained that the first step in manifesting love was to establish the correct identity. And she said that most lonely people make the mistake of identifying themselves as unwanted or unlovable or too old or too damaged. And this identity becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because the subconscious mind will always create circumstances that match the identity you claim. And she taught the audience to declare every night before sleep, I am irresistibly attractive to my perfect partner, and to say these words with conviction and feeling. The second step, Dorothy explained, was to create the proper declaration, and she said that most people sabotage their love manifestation by declaring what they do not want instead of what they do want. And they say things like, "I will never find anyone," or "all the good ones are taken," or "I am too old for love." And these negative declarations become commands to the subconscious to create more loneliness and rejection. And instead, Dorothy taught the audience to declare, "My perfect partner is now in my life, and we love each other completely." The third step was to create a detailed vision of the relationship, and Dorothy emphasized that this vision should not focus on the physical appearance of the partner, because the subconscious mind cares more about the feeling and the energy of the relationship than about superficial characteristics. And she instructed the audience to imagine how it would feel to be loved and cherished and appreciated, and to create vivid scenes of sharing meals and conversations and activities with their perfect partner. Kenneth felt inspired by Dorothy's teaching, but he also felt doubtful because 8 years of loneliness had convinced him that he was fundamentally unlovable, and that no woman could possibly want to be with an overweight 64-year-old man with thinning hair and limited income, and a history of rejection. But Dorothy seemed to read his thoughts, and she said that these limiting beliefs were exactly the kind of lead that needed to be transmuted into gold through the alchemical process. That night, Kenneth decided to try the 3-substance formula, despite his doubts, and just before sleep, he declared aloud, "I am irresistibly attractive to my perfect partner." And at first, the words felt false and ridiculous, but he forced himself to repeat them until he could speak them with some conviction. And then he declared, "My perfect partner is now in my life, and we love each other completely." And again, the words felt strange at first, but he persisted until they began to feel more natural. Creating the vision was the most challenging part for Kenneth, because he had not imagined himself in a loving relationship for so many years that it was difficult to picture what that would look like and feel like. But he forced himself to create detailed scenes of sharing breakfast with a warm, loving woman and walking hand in hand through the park and sitting together on a couch watching movies and talking about their days and falling asleep in each other's arms. And he held these images in his mind as he drifted off to sleep. The first week of practicing the 3-substance formula, Kenneth noticed that his mood began to improve, and he found himself taking better care of his appearance. And he bought some new clothes and started walking in the park every morning and eating more nutritious meals. And several people commented that he looked healthier and more vibrant. And he began to feel more confident and attractive than he had felt in years, and he realized that the alchemical process was working from the inside out. During the second week, Kenneth decided to start attending social activities in his community, and he joined a book club at the library and signed up for a cooking class at the community college and began volunteering at the animal shelter. And he discovered that getting out of his apartment and interacting with other people made him feel more alive and interesting, and he began to see himself not as a lonely old man, but as someone who had a lot to offer to the right person. It was during the third week that Kenneth met Carol at the cooking class, and she was 61 years old and had been widowed for 5 years, and she had a warm smile and kind eyes and a gentle way of speaking that made Kenneth feel comfortable and accepted. And they were paired together to prepare a Mediterranean chicken dish, and they discovered that they had similar tastes in food and books and music, and they talked and laughed throughout the entire class. After the cooking class, Kenneth felt nervous about asking Carol for coffee, but he remembered Dorothy's teaching about acting from his new identity as someone who is irresistibly attractive, and he found the courage to invite her to join him at a nearby cafe, and she said yes with such enthusiasm that Kenneth felt a surge of confidence he had not experienced in years, and they sat together for 2 hours, talking about their children and grandchildren and their hopes for the future. The relationship with Carol developed naturally and easily over the following weeks, and Kenneth was amazed by how different this felt from his marriage to Linda, which had always been filled with conflict and criticism, and he realized that he had been attracting partners who matched his old identity as someone who was difficult to love, but now that he had changed his identity to someone who was irresistibly attractive, he was drawing a woman who truly appreciated and cherished him. Within 3 months, Kenneth and Carol had fallen deeply in love and decided to move in together, and they found a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment that cost less than what they had been paying separately for their individual places, and they split all expenses equally, which gave them both more disposable income. And they spent their days exploring the city together and cooking elaborate meals and attending concerts and movies, and Kenneth felt like he was living in a dream. The transformation in Kenneth's life was so dramatic that he began teaching other lonely seniors about the 3 alchemical substances, and he would tell them that loneliness is not a fact but a choice, and that any person at any age can use the power of their sleeping mind to transmute the lead of isolation into the gold of perfect love. And he became living proof that it is never too late to create the life and the love you desire. Kenneth's story demonstrates the power of properly combining the 3 alchemical substances, and his success came not from changing his external circumstances first, but from changing his internal identity and declaration and vision, and then allowing his subconscious mind to rearrange his external world to match his new programming. And this is the essence of true alchemy, which always works from the inside out. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the 3 substances must be blended in the correct sequence every single night, just before sleep, and the sequence is always identity first, then declaration, then vision, because identity establishes who you are. Declaration states what you have, and vision shows how you live. And when these 3 substances are combined correctly, they create what she called the philosopher's stone of consciousness, which has the power to transmute any situation. The mistake that most people make when trying to use the 3 substances is that they focus too much on the details of how their manifestation will come about, and they try to control the process with their conscious mind. But Florence taught that the subconscious mind is infinitely more intelligent and creative than the conscious mind, and it knows exactly how to bring about the desired result in the most perfect way. And your job is simply to provide the basic ingredients and then allow the alchemical process to unfold. What makes the 3-substance formula so powerful is that it gives the subconscious mind a complete blueprint for manifestation, and when you declare your identity, you are telling your subconscious who you are, and when you speak your declaration, you are telling it what you have, and when you create your vision, you are showing it how you live. And with this complete information, your subconscious can begin immediately to restructure your reality to match your programming. The timing of the 3-substance ritual is crucial because it must be performed in the moments just before sleep, when the conscious mind is relaxing its grip on reality and the subconscious is most receptive to new programming. And if you practice this ritual consistently for 40 consecutive nights, Florence taught that you would see dramatic changes in your external circumstances because 40 nights is the minimum time required for the subconscious to completely reorganize a life pattern. The beauty of the 3-substance formula is that it works regardless of your current circumstances or past failures because it operates at the level of consciousness which is deeper than any external condition. And Florence Scovel Shinn proved this truth through thousands of cases where people used identity declaration and vision to completely transform their lives. And she documented stories of people who manifested perfect health after being diagnosed with terminal illness, and people who attracted great wealth after losing everything, and people who found true love after decades of loneliness and rejection. One of the UE's most important aspects of working with the 3 alchemical substances is consistency. And Florence taught that you must practice the formula every single night for a minimum of 40 days without missing even one night, because the subconscious mind requires repetition to fully accept new programming. And if you skip nights or practice sporadically, the old patterns will reassert themselves, and you will not see the dramatic transformation that is possible when the formula is applied correctly and persistently. Florence also emphasized that the 3 substances must be applied with complete faith and expectation, and you cannot hedge your bets by declaring your desired reality while secretly doubting that it will manifest. And she taught that doubt is like adding water to gasoline, and it dilutes the power of the formula and makes it ineffective. And instead, you must speak your identity and declaration and create your vision with the absolute certainty that what you are programming into your subconscious is already true in the invisible realm and will soon manifest in the visible world. Another crucial element of the three-substance practice is that you must be willing to act on the new identity you have claimed. And if you declare that you are irresistibly attractive to your perfect partner, but then continue to hide in your apartment and avoid social situations, you are contradicting your own programming and confusing your subconscious mind. And Florence taught that the subconscious will only manifest what you truly believe about yourself, and your beliefs are revealed not by your words, but by your actions. The three alchemical substances also work synergistically, which means that each substance amplifies the power of the other two. And when identity declaration and vision are properly combined, they create a resonance in consciousness that attracts corresponding experiences in the physical world. And this is why Florence insisted that all three substances must be used together and in the correct sequence, because using only one or two of the substances will produce limited results compared to the miraculous transformations that occur when all three are blended correctly. Kenneth discovered that the three-substance formula continued to work long after his initial manifestation of love with Carol, and he began using the same technique to create abundance in other areas of his life. And he programmed his sleep with declarations of perfect health and vibrant energy. And within 6 months, his chronic back pain had disappeared, and his blood pressure had normalized, and his doctor was amazed by the improvement in his overall physical condition. And Kenneth knew that his sleeping mind had literally healed his body. He also used the three substances to manifest financial abundance, and he declared his identity as someone who always has more than enough money. And he stated his declaration that multiple streams of income flow to him easily, and he created vivid visions of himself living in financial freedom. And within 1 year, he had started a small consulting business, helping other seniors navigate technology, and he was earning an additional $800 per month, which gave him and Carol much more financial security and freedom. The most profound aspect of Kenneth's transformation was not the external changes, but the internal shift in his relationship with life itself. And he went from feeling like a victim of circumstances to feeling like a conscious creator of his reality. And he understood that he had always possessed the power to transform his life, but had simply never known how to access and direct that power. And now that he knew the secret of the three alchemical substances, he felt like he held the keys to the kingdom of unlimited possibility. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that every person is born with the same innate ability to transmute their circumstances through the power of consciousness. But most people live their entire lives without ever discovering this ability because they are never taught the proper techniques, and they waste their precious sleeping hours programming their subconscious with worry and fear, instead of using those hours to create the life of their dreams. And she said that this is the greatest tragedy of human existence. The three alchemical substances represent the complete technology of consciousness. And when you understand how to use identity declaration and vision correctly, you possess the same power that the ancient masters used to perform what appeared to be miracles, but which were actually the natural result of working with spiritual law. And Florence taught that there are no miracles, only natural laws that are not yet understood by the majority of humanity. And anyone who learns these laws can apply them to create whatever reality they desire. And while you rest now, you can feel the three alchemical substances beginning to blend within your consciousness, and your identity is being established, and your declaration is being accepted, and your vision is being received. And tonight, when you sleep, your subconscious mind will begin the sacred work of transmutation. And when you wake tomorrow morning, the philosopher's stone will be one day closer to completion, and your lead will be one step closer to becoming gold. And you will understand that you are not just a dreamer, but an alchemist of the highest order with the power to transform any situation through the sacred science of consciousness. You are beginning to understand now that your consciousness is the true laboratory where miracles are created. And as you rest in this peaceful state of receptivity, I want to share with you one of Florence Scovel Shinn's most profound discoveries. And that is the understanding that your resistances and fears and doubts are not obstacles to manifestation, but are actually the raw material from which your greatest treasures are forged. And what appears to be blocking your good is actually the lead that must be dissolved in the alchemical furnace of your sleeping mind. Most people make the mistake of trying to fight against their resistances, and they exhaust themselves battling their fears and doubts and limiting beliefs. But Florence Scovel Shinn taught a completely different approach, and she discovered that resistance is not your enemy, but your teacher. And every fear that arises in your consciousness is pointing you toward the exact area where transformation is most needed, and the greatest gold always lies buried beneath the heaviest lead. Florence understood that the human psyche naturally resists change, even when that change would bring tremendous good. And this resistance serves an important protective function, because it prevents us from making impulsive decisions that might not be in our highest interest. But the problem arises when this protective mechanism becomes so strong that it blocks all positive change and keeps us trapped in patterns of limitation and suffering. And this is where the alchemy of sleep becomes absolutely essential. During the waking hours, your conscious mind, with all its fears and doubts and logical objections, maintains strict control over what you allow yourself to believe and desire. But during sleep, these protective barriers naturally dissolve, and your consciousness becomes fluid and malleable and open to new possibilities. And this is why Florence always said that the darkness of night is actually the light of transformation, because it is in the darkness that the lead of resistance can be safely dissolved without triggering the alarm systems of the conscious mind. Her name was Brenda, and she was 57 years old when she discovered how to use her resistances as fuel for transformation. And she had been struggling with panic attacks about money for the past 12 years, ever since her husband died, and left her with overwhelming debt, and the fear of financial ruin had become so intense that she could barely function. And every time she tried to think about improving her situation, she would be flooded with anxiety and terror, and her body would shake, and her heart would race, and she felt completely powerless to change her circumstances. Brenda lived in a small trailer park in Bakersfield, California, where she paid $450 per month for a space that barely fit her aging mobile home, and the trailer was in constant need of repair, and the roof leaked when it rained, and the heating system worked sporadically, and she was surviving on $823 per month from Social Security, which left her less than $400 after paying rent and utilities. And she lived in constant fear that some unexpected expense would push her over the edge into complete destitution. It was 3:47 on a Friday morning in November when Brenda discovered Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching about resistance. And she had been lying awake for hours, consumed by panic about a letter she had received, stating that her trailer park was being sold and all residents would need to find new housing within 90 days. And she had called dozens of other parks, but none had spaces available within her budget, and she felt like she was drowning in an ocean of fear and desperation. The panic attacks had started immediately after her husband Frank's death, when she realized that his gambling addiction had left them $67,000 in debt, and she had spent the last 12 years paying down this debt while living in constant terror that something would happen to make her situation even worse. And every night, she would lie in bed calculating and recalculating her meager finances and imagining all the catastrophes that could befall her. And the fear had become so overwhelming that she avoided opening bills or answering the phone or thinking about the future. That Friday morning, Brenda had been listening to a late-night radio program about healing trauma when the host began discussing Florence Scovel Shinn's revolutionary approach to working with resistance, and the host explained that fear is not the opposite of faith, but is actually concentrated, faith pointed in the wrong direction, and that the same mental energy that creates panic can be redirected to create miracles. And Brenda felt something shift inside her chest, because this was the first time anyone had suggested that her intense fear might actually be a sign of her power rather than her weakness. The radio host told the story of a woman who had suffered from crippling anxiety about her health for 20 years and had tried every conventional treatment without success. But when she learned to use her fear as fuel for healing visualization during sleep, she was completely free from anxiety within 60 days, and she discovered that her nervous system's capacity for intense feeling was actually a gift that allowed her to manifest more quickly than people who had less emotional sensitivity. And Brenda began to wonder if her overwhelming financial fears might actually indicate that she had tremendous power to create abundance. Following the instructions she heard on the radio, Brenda began that very night to practice what Florence Scovel Shinn called resistance alchemy. And instead of fighting against her financial fears, she began to welcome them as messengers pointing her toward areas that needed healing and transformation. And just before sleep, she would speak directly to her fears, saying, "Thank you for protecting me, and now I ask you to step aside so that divine abundance can flow." And then she would breathe deeply and imagine her fear dissolving like sugar in warm water. The technique involved 3 specific steps that had to be performed in exact sequence. And the first step was acknowledgement, where Brenda would name her specific fear aloud and thank it for trying to keep her safe. And the second step was redirection, where she would ask the fear to transform itself into excitement about incoming abundance. And the third step was replacement, where she would fill the space left by the dissolved fear with vivid images of financial security and peace and joy. And she discovered that this process felt much more natural than trying to pretend her fears did not exist. The first night Brenda practiced resistance alchemy, she noticed that her usual 3 hours of middle-of-the-night panic was replaced by the deepest sleep she had experienced in years. And when she woke up at 7:23 in the morning, she felt calm and centered in a way that amazed her because her external circumstances had not changed, but her relationship to those circumstances had shifted dramatically. And instead of feeling like a victim of her fears, she felt like someone who was learning to work with powerful forces. On the 4th day of practicing the technique, Brenda received an unexpected phone call from her late husband's sister, Margaret, who lived in Phoenix, and Margaret explained that she had been thinking about Brenda and wondering how she was managing. And when Brenda told her about the trailer park situation, Margaret immediately offered to let Brenda live in her guest house, rent-free, for as long as she needed. And Margaret said she had been lonely since her own husband died and would welcome the company. But Margaret's offer was just the beginning, because when Brenda mentioned that she was worried about having enough money for basic expenses, Margaret revealed that Frank had a life insurance policy that Brenda had never known about. And Margaret had found the paperwork while going through some old family documents, and the policy had been collecting interest for 12 years and was now worth $43,000. And when Brenda called the insurance company, she discovered that Margaret was right, and she was the sole beneficiary. Within 2 weeks, Brenda had moved to Phoenix and was living in Margaret's beautiful guest house, which had its own kitchen and bathroom, and a lovely view of the desert mountains. And for the first time in 12 years, she felt safe and secure, and her panic attacks disappeared completely, and she realized that her intense fear had actually been pointing her toward this exact solution. And if she had not been forced to leave the trailer park, she never would have reconnected with Margaret and discovered the insurance money. The transformation in Brenda's life was so profound that she began to understand what Florence Scovel Shinn meant when she wrote about the alchemy of resistance. And Brenda realized that her 12 years of financial terror had not been punishment but preparation. And every night that she had lain awake in fear had been building up a tremendous reservoir of emotional energy that could be redirected toward creating abundance and security. And the universe had been using her own resistance to guide her toward her greatest good. As Brenda settled into her new life in Phoenix, she continued to practice resistance alchemy every night, and she found that other areas of her life began to transform as well. And her chronic health problems started improving, and she began making friends in her new community, and she even started a small business making and selling jewelry, and discovered that she had artistic talents she never knew she possessed. And within 6 months, she was earning enough money to feel completely financially secure for the first time in her adult life. The key insight that Brenda gained from Working with resistance alchemy was that fear is never about the present moment, but is always about imagined future scenarios. And when she learned to redirect the creative power of her imagination from catastrophic thinking to abundant thinking, her entire reality shifted, and she understood that the same mind that had created her fears was the same mind that could create her dreams. And the only difference was the direction in which she pointed her attention. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that every human being is born with a powerful manifestation mechanism. But most people accidentally point this mechanism toward their fears instead of their desires, and they become expert at creating exactly what they do not want. And the beauty of resistance alchemy is that it teaches you how to recognize when you are creating in reverse and how to quickly redirect your creative power toward positive outcomes. The scientific explanation for why resistance alchemy works so effectively is that the same neural pathways that carry fear also carry excitement, and these emotions are physiologically almost identical. And the only difference is the story your conscious mind tells about what you are feeling. And when you learn to reframe resistance as excitement, your nervous system begins to anticipate positive outcomes instead of negative ones. And this shift in expectation changes your behavior and perception in ways that naturally attract better circumstances. Brenda discovered that resistance alchemy worked best during the hours just before dawn, when the subconscious mind is most receptive to new programming. And she would set her alarm for 4:30 in the morning and spend 30 minutes dissolving any fears or doubts that had accumulated during the previous day. And she would always end these sessions by flooding her consciousness with images of abundance and security and love. And she found that this practice set the tone for her entire day and attracted positive experiences and opportunities. The most profound aspect of Brenda's transformation was not the external changes, but the internal shift in her relationship with uncertainty. And instead of trying to control every aspect of her life, she learned to trust that whatever challenges arose could be transmuted into opportunities for growth and expansion. And she understood that resistance is not a sign that you are doing something wrong, but is actually a sign that you are approaching a breakthrough, and the greatest treasures always lie just beyond the point where most people give up. And while you rest now, you can feel your own resistances beginning to soften and dissolve, and you do not need to fight against them, but simply allow them to transform themselves into excitement about the amazing changes that are coming into your life. And your fears are not your enemies, but your allies, pointing you toward areas where the most beautiful transformation is possible. And tonight, as you sleep, your subconscious mind will take all the lead of your limitations and dissolve it in the golden fire of unlimited possibility. As your consciousness continues to relax into this receptive state, you are about to learn one of Florence Scovel Shinn's most practical and empowering teachings. And this is the sacred art of reading the golden signs that appear when your dream alchemy is working. And these signs are not coincidences or wishful thinking, but are actual communications from the invisible realm, confirming that your subconscious programming is taking root and beginning to reshape your reality. And learning to recognize and interpret these signs correctly is essential for maintaining faith during the period of manifestation. Florence discovered that the universe speaks to us constantly through symbols and synchronicities and meaningful coincidences. But most people miss these messages because they are looking for dramatic, supernatural events instead of paying attention to the subtle but significant patterns that appear in everyday life. And she taught that the first signs of successful alchemy always appear in the early morning hours, when the veil between the visible and invisible worlds is thinnest, and your consciousness is still connected to the deeper realms where all manifestation originates. The golden signs always appear in a specific sequence that Florence called the 3 waves of confirmation, and the first wave consists of internal signs that you feel within your own consciousness, and these include sudden feelings of peace and optimism and certainty that were not present before, and vivid dreams that show you living in your desired reality, and unexpected insights and ideas that seem to come from nowhere. and these internal signs usually appear within the first 7 days of beginning your dream alchemy practice. The second wave consists of environmental signs that appear in your immediate surroundings, and these include finding objects or money in unexpected places and overhearing conversations that contain exactly the information you need and receiving unexpected contact from people who can help you, and noticing number patterns and meaningful coincidences. And these environmental signs typically appear between the second and third week of consistent practice, and they serve to confirm that your internal programming is beginning to influence your external circumstances. The third wave consists of manifestation signs, which are actual changes in your material circumstances, and these include new opportunities appearing seemingly out of nowhere, and old problems resolving themselves without effort, and unexpected money arriving from various sources and relationships improving dramatically. And these manifestation signs usually appear between the 4th and 8th week of practice, and they represent the full flowering of your alchemical work as the gold of your desires finally emerges from the lead of your limitations. His name was Stephen, and he was 62 years old when he learned to read the golden signs of manifestation, and he had been unemployed for 14 months after being laid off from his job as an insurance adjuster, and his unemployment benefits had expired, and he was living on his small savings, which were dwindling rapidly, and he felt invisible and worthless, and convinced that no one would hire a man his age, and he had applied for hundreds of jobs without receiving a single interview, and his confidence was completely shattered. Stephen lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment in Cleveland, Ohio, where he paid $957 per month in rent and utilities, and he had exactly $3,412 left in his savings account, and he calculated that he could survive for another 3.5 months before he would be forced to move in with his sister in Toledo, which felt like the ultimate humiliation and admission of failure. And every day he searched job websites and sent out resumes, and every evening he checked his email, hoping for responses that never came. It was 6:15 on a Monday morning in December when Stephen first learned about Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching about golden signs, and he had been unable to sleep because of anxiety about an eviction notice he expected to receive, and he was listening to a podcast about metaphysical principles when the host began explaining how to recognize the signs that manifestation is working, and the host said that most people give up just before their breakthrough, because they do not understand that the universe always sends confirmation signals before physical results appear. The podcast host told the story of a man who had been programming his sleep for employment for 32 days without seeing any external results, and he was ready to give up when he began noticing small signs that his situation was changing. And first he found a $20 bill in an old jacket pocket, and then he received a phone call from a former colleague who mentioned a possible job opening. And then he had a vivid dream where he was shaking hands with a hiring manager, and within 1 week of noticing these signs, he received 3 job offers. And Stephen felt hopeful for the first time in months because he realized he might have been missing similar signs in his own life. That Monday night, Stephen began practicing dream alchemy using Florence Scovel Shinn's 3-substance formula, and he declared his identity as a valuable and sought-after professional, and he stated his completed reality as, "My perfect job has found me, and I am earning excellent income doing work I love." And he created vivid visions of himself in a comfortable office environment, being respected and appreciated by colleagues and clients. And he held these images as he drifted off to sleep for the first time in weeks, feeling peaceful and optimistic. The first internal sign appeared on the 3rd night when Stephen had the most vivid and encouraging dream of his career, and in the dream, he was sitting in a modern office overlooking a city skyline, and he was reviewing contracts and making important decisions, and everyone who spoke to him treated him with respect and admiration. And when he woke up, he felt energized and confident in a way he had not experienced since losing his job. And he knew somehow that this dream was not just wishful thinking, but was a preview of his coming reality. On the 7th day, Stephen was walking to the grocery store when he found a lottery ticket on the sidewalk, and when he had it checked at the convenience store, He discovered it was worth $15, and the cashier commented that he must be entering a lucky period. And Stephen felt a thrill of recognition, because he remembered the podcast host saying that finding money is always one of the first environmental signs that manifestation is working, and he began paying closer attention to everything that happened around him. The second wave of signs began appearing during the second week, and Stephen started noticing number patterns everywhere, and his receipt at the coffee shop was $8.88, and his parking meter number was 777, and he kept seeing the same sequence of numbers on clocks and license plates and addresses, and when he looked up the meaning of these number patterns, he discovered they were all associated with financial abundance and career success, and he felt like the universe was sending him encrypted messages of encouragement. During the third week, Stephen received an unexpected phone call from his former supervisor, Janet, who had left their old company 6 months before he was laid off. And Janet explained that she was now working for a consulting firm that specialized in insurance fraud investigation. And they were looking for someone with Stephen's exact experience and expertise, and she asked if he would be interested in a contract position that could lead to permanent employment. And Stephen could hardly believe that this call had come out of nowhere after months of fruitless job searching. The phone call with Janet led to a video interview the following week, and Stephen was amazed by how naturally and confidently he presented himself, and he felt like a completely different person than the desperate and defeated man who had been sending out resumes for 14 months. And the interviewer was clearly impressed by his knowledge and experience, and at the end of the call, she said they would make a decision within 48 hours, and Stephen felt certain that the job was his. True to her word, the interviewer called Stephen exactly 48 hours later and offered him the contract position at a rate of $45 per hour for 30 hours per week, which would give him $5,400 per month and the possibility of additional projects and overtime. And Stephen accepted immediately and felt like he was living in a dream, because 6 weeks earlier he had been facing eviction, and now he had more income potential than he had ever earned in his life. But the manifestation signs continued to appear even after Stephen started his new job. And within his first month, the company was so impressed with his work that they offered him a full-time permanent position with benefits and a salary of $78,000 per year plus bonuses. And Stephen realized that he had not just found a job, but had actually manifested his ideal career doing work he loved with people who valued his contributions, and he was earning more money than he had ever dreamed possible. The transformation in Stephen's life was so dramatic that he began teaching other unemployed professionals about the golden signs, and he would tell them that the key is to pay attention to everything that happens after you begin your dream alchemy practice. Because the universe always confirms that your programming is working before the final manifestation appears, and most people miss these confirmations because they are focused only on the end result instead of appreciating the journey. Stephen discovered that the golden signs serve multiple purposes, and they not only confirm that manifestation is working, but they also build faith and confidence during the waiting period, and they provide guidance about actions to take and opportunities to pursue. And they create a sense of partnership with invisible forces that makes the entire process feel magical and meaningful, instead of like a struggle against insurmountable odds. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that learning to read the golden signs correctly requires a shift in perception from ordinary consciousness to what she called spiritual sight. And this means looking for meaning and connection in everything that happens instead of dismissing unusual events as random coincidences. And when you develop spiritual sight, you begin to see that you live in a universe that is constantly communicating with you and supporting your highest good. The mistake that most people make when looking for signs is that they expect them to be dramatic and unmistakable. But Florence taught that the most powerful signs are often subtle and require spiritual discernment to recognize. And she said that the universe prefers to communicate through gentle nudges and quiet confirmations rather than through overwhelming supernatural events. And the people who become most skilled at manifestation are those who learn to pay attention to the whispers rather than waiting for The shouts Stephen learned that the timing of signs follows a predictable pattern, and the internal signs always come first, because transformation must happen in consciousness before it can happen in circumstances, and the environmental signs come second, because they represent the bridge between inner and outer reality, and the manifestation signs come last, because they are the final flowering of the alchemical process, and understanding this sequence helps you maintain faith during the periods when you can feel changes happening internally but cannot yet see them externally. Another important aspect of reading golden signs is understanding that they often appear in clusters rather than individually. And when you begin to notice meaningful coincidences and synchronicities, they tend to multiply rapidly because your increased awareness creates a feedback loop that attracts even more signs. And Stephen found that once he started paying attention to the signs, they appeared everywhere, and he felt like he was living in a friendly universe that was constantly sending him messages of love and support. The most profound insight that Stephen gained from learning to read the golden signs was that manifestation is not a mechanical process, but is actually an ongoing conversation between your consciousness and the infinite intelligence of the universe. And the signs are the universe's way of letting you know that your prayers and intentions have been heard, and that help is on the way. And this understanding transformed his entire relationship with life from one of struggle and separation to one of trust and collaboration. Florence Scovel Shinn also taught that you can actively invite signs by asking the universe for specific confirmations. And she recommended choosing a particular symbol or number sequence or type of event and asking to see it within a certain time frame as proof that your manifestation is on track. And Stephen used this technique many times and was always amazed by how quickly and clearly the requested signs would appear. And this practice strengthened his faith and deepened his sense of connection with invisible guidance. The scientific explanation for why golden signs appear is that when you consistently program your subconscious mind with positive intentions, your brain begins to notice patterns and opportunities that were always present but were previously filtered out by your conscious attention. And this phenomenon is called selective attention, and it explains why pregnant women suddenly notice other pregnant women everywhere, and why people who are shopping for a particular car suddenly see that model on every street. And while you rest now, you can feel your own spiritual sight beginning to awaken, and you are becoming more sensitive to the golden signs that are already appearing in your life. And tomorrow when you wake, you will begin to notice meaningful coincidences and helpful synchronicities and unexpected confirmations that your dream alchemy is working, and you will understand that you are not alone in this process, but are supported by invisible forces that are constantly working on your behalf to bring your highest good into manifestation. As you continue to rest in this state of deep receptivity, your consciousness is beginning to understand one of the most mysterious and essential aspects of dream alchemy, and that is the sacred principle of divine timing. And Florence Scovel Shinn discovered that manifestation follows the same natural laws as cooking, and just as a master chef knows that different dishes require different cooking times and temperatures, the universe operates according to its own perfect timing, and attempts to rush or force the process will only delay or spoil the final result. Most people become impatient when their dream alchemy does not produce immediate visible results, and they make the mistake of checking their manifestation every day, like someone who keeps opening the oven door to see if the bread is ready. And Florence taught that this impatience actually interferes with the alchemical process because it introduces doubt and anxiety into your consciousness. And these negative emotions contaminate the pure programming you have been instilling in your subconscious mind during sleep. Florence understood that there is no time in divine mind, and that from the perspective of infinite consciousness, your desired reality already exists in its completed form. And the only reason you experience a delay between your declaration and its manifestation is that your human awareness is locked into linear time and must wait for the perfect orchestration of circumstances and people and events that will bring your vision into physical reality in the most harmonious and beneficial way possible. The key to working successfully with divine timing is learning to live in what Florence called the space between planting and harvest. And during this sacred period, your job is not to dig up the seeds to see if they are growing, but to continue watering them with faith and expectation while you go about your daily life with peaceful confidence that everything is unfolding exactly as it should. And this requires a level of spiritual maturity that comes only through experience and practice. Her name was Carolyn, and she was 55 years old when she learned the profound lesson of divine timing, and she had been practicing dream alchemy for 7 months, trying to manifest her ideal romantic partner. And although she had been seeing encouraging signs and feeling positive changes in her energy and confidence, she had not yet met the man of her dreams, and she was beginning to doubt whether the process really worked and was considering giving up entirely. Carolyn lived in a comfortable apartment in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where she worked as a freelance graphic designer and earned enough to support herself adequately. But she felt incomplete without a loving partner to share her life, and she had been divorced for 9 years after her husband left her for a younger woman. And she had tried online dating and social events and blind dates arranged by friends, but had never found anyone who felt like her true match. And she was beginning to fear that she was destined to remain alone. It was 9:47 on a Sunday evening in June when Carolyn first heard Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching about divine timing. And she had been feeling discouraged because earlier that day she had attended a friend's wedding, and seeing the joy and love between the bride and groom had intensified her own loneliness. And she wondered why everyone else seemed to find love easily while she remained single, despite all her efforts. And she was questioning whether there was something fundamentally wrong with her that prevented her from attracting a good man. That Sunday night, instead of practicing her usual dream alchemy routine, Carolyn was lying in bed feeling sorry for herself and considering whether to abandon the whole process when she remembered something she had read about Florence Scovel Shinn's own experience with divine timing, and how Florence had waited patiently for her perfect demonstrations to manifest, and had always trusted that delays meant that something even better was being prepared. And this memory gave Carolyn the strength to continue her practice for 1 more month. The next morning, Carolyn made a decision that would change everything, and instead of focusing on when her partner would arrive, she began to use her dream alchemy sessions to cultivate gratitude for the love that was already present in her life, and she programmed her sleep with declarations of appreciation for her health and her work and her friendships and her beautiful home and her creative abilities, and she found that this shift in focus brought her tremendous peace and made her feel abundant instead of lacking. As Carolyn continued to practice gratitude-based dream alchemy, she noticed that her entire energy began to change, and she felt more radiant and magnetic and confident than she had in years. And people began commenting on how vibrant and attractive she looked, and she started receiving more social invitations and professional opportunities. And she realized that by focusing on appreciation instead of desperation, she had become the kind of person who naturally attracts good things into her life. During the 8th month of her practice, Carolyn decided to take a pottery class at the local community center because she had always been interested in working with clay, and she felt drawn to try something completely new and creative. And on the first night of class, she was paired with a gentle, soft-spoken man named Robert, who was 61 years old and recently retired from a career as a high school art teacher. And they discovered that they had similar interests in art and nature and spirituality. Robert had also been divorced for several years and had given up on finding love until he started feeling an inexplicable urge to take the pottery class, and he told Carolyn that he had never worked with clay before, but something had compelled him to sign up, and he felt like he was being guided to try new things and meet new people. And as they worked together, creating their first simple bowls, they talked easily and naturally, and both felt an immediate sense of comfort and familiarity with each other. Over the following weeks, Carolyn and Robert continued to meet for pottery class, and they began having coffee afterward and taking long walks together. And Carolyn was amazed by how effortless and natural their connection felt compared to the forced and awkward encounters she had experienced with other men. And she realized that Robert possessed all the qualities she had been programming into her subconscious during her months of dream alchemy. And he was kind and creative and spiritually minded and genuinely interested in her thoughts and feelings. The relationship developed slowly and organically without any pressure or drama, and by the 4th month they both knew they had found their life partner, and they moved in together and began planning a simple wedding ceremony surrounded by their closest friends and family. And Carolyn understood that the 7 months of apparent delay had been necessary for both of them to do the inner work required to be ready for true love. And if they had met earlier, neither would have been prepared for the depth of connection they now shared. Carolyn's story illustrates perfectly what Florence Scovel Shinn meant when she taught that divine timing is always perfect timing, and the universe never delivers your good too early or too late, but always at the exact moment when you are ready to receive it and appreciate it fully and use it wisely. And attempts to force manifestation before its natural time will either fail completely or will bring you something that looks like what you wanted, but lacks the deeper fulfillment you were truly. Seeking the concept of divine timing also explains why some manifestations appear to happen overnight, while others take months or even years to fully unfold. And Florence taught that simple requests involving only yourself can manifest quickly because there are fewer variables to coordinate. But complex manifestations involving other people and multiple circumstances require more time for the universe to orchestrate all the necessary elements in perfect harmony, and the greater the demonstration. The longer the preparation period required, Florence discovered that there are specific signs that indicate when a manifestation is approaching its completion. And these include a sudden sense of peace and detachment about the outcome, and unexpected delays or obstacles that force you to slow down and wait, and increasing synchronicities and meaningful coincidences, and a feeling that something important is about to happen, even though you cannot see any external evidence, and learning to recognize these signs helps you maintain faith during the final phase of manifestation. An important aspect of divine timing is understanding that the universe often delivers your good in a completely different form than you expected. And what appears to be a delay or detour is actually the universe's way of bringing you something much better than what you originally requested. And Carolyn had been focused on meeting a man through traditional dating methods, but the universe guided her to pottery class, where she found not just a romantic partner, but a true soulmate who shared her deepest values and interests. Florence taught that impatience is actually a form of lack consciousness, because it implies that you do not trust the universe to take care of you, and it creates anxiety and desperation that repel the very things you are trying to attract. And the antidote to impatience is cultivating what she called divine indifference, which is a state of peaceful confidence that your good is on its way and will arrive at exactly the right moment, regardless of how long it takes or how it comes about. The practical application of working with divine timing involves learning to live fully in the present moment while maintaining faith in your future good. And this means continuing to enjoy your life and pursue your interests and maintain your relationships while you wait for your manifestation to appear. And Carolyn discovered that the months she spent learning pottery and developing her artistic skills were not wasted time, but were actually preparing her to appreciate and connect with Robert, who shared her creative interests. Florence also taught that divine timing operates on multiple levels simultaneously, and while you are waiting for one manifestation to appear, the universe is often preparing the ground for even greater demonstrations. And during the months that Carolyn was waiting for love, she was also unconsciously developing the confidence and self-worth that would allow her to maintain a healthy relationship, and she was clearing away old emotional patterns that might have sabotaged her happiness with Robert. The scientific explanation for divine timing relates to chaos theory and the butterfly effect, which demonstrate that small changes in initial conditions can lead to dramatically different outcomes. And when you plant a seed in consciousness through dream alchemy, the universe must coordinate countless variables and influences to bring about the perfect manifestation. And this process requires time and patience and faith. Just like growing a garden requires seasons and weather and cycles that cannot be rushed, Carolyn learned that the waiting period is not empty time, but is actually when the most important work is happening. And during those 7 months, her subconscious mind was not only attracting Robert, but was also transforming her own energy and removing the subtle barriers that had been preventing her from finding love. And she was healing old wounds and releasing limiting beliefs and developing the emotional maturity needed to create a lasting partnership. The most profound insight that Carolyn gained about divine timing was that the delay was actually a gift, because it gave her time to become the woman who would be worthy of the love she desired. And if she had met Robert 7 months earlier, she might have sabotaged the relationship through insecurity or neediness. But by the time they actually met, she was confident and whole and ready to give and receive love freely without desperation or conditions. Florence Scovel Shinn also taught that you can work with divine timing by asking the universe to show you what you need to learn or do during the waiting period. And often the delay is an indication that there is some inner work or practical preparation that needs to be completed before you are ready for your demonstration. And Carolyn found that when she shifted her focus from waiting for love to developing herself as a person, she not only became happier, but actually accelerated the manifestation process. And while you rest now, you can feel yourself relaxing into the perfect rhythm of divine timing, and you understand that everything is unfolding exactly as it should. And there is no need to hurry or worry, because your good is already on its way and will arrive at the perfect moment when you are completely ready to receive it and appreciate it fully. And the waiting time is not lost time, but is preparation time when you are being perfectly prepared for your perfect demonstration. As your consciousness continues to expand in this peaceful state of receptivity, you are about to discover one of Florence Scovel Shinn's most powerful and least understood teachings, and that is the principle of collective manifestation. And she realized that individual dream alchemy becomes exponentially more powerful when it is practiced within a community of like-minded souls who are all working together to transmute the lead of limitation into the gold of abundance. And she called this collective energy field the invisible Athanor, because it functions like a massive alchemical furnace that amplifies the transformative power of every individual practitioner. Florence understood that consciousness is not contained within the boundaries of individual minds, but is actually a vast ocean of awareness in which we all participate. And when multiple people focus their intention and attention on similar goals, they create what modern science calls a morphogenic field. And this field makes it easier for anyone within its influence to achieve the same type of manifestation. And this is why certain breakthroughs seem to happen simultaneously in different parts of the world. When the time is right, the collective Athanor operates according to the principle that Florence called the law of mutual support. And this law states that when you sincerely desire and work for the highest good of others, you automatically accelerate your own manifestation process. And conversely, when you focus only on your own desires without regard for the welfare of others, you actually slow down and limit your own results. And this understanding transforms manifestation from a selfish pursuit into a sacred service that benefits all of humanity. Most people practice dream alchemy in isolation, and while this can certainly produce positive results, the power increases dramatically when you consciously connect with others who are engaged in the same work. And Florence taught that you do not need to physically meet these other practitioners, but can connect with them energetically through your intention and visualization. And by acknowledging their presence and success, you become part of a worldwide network of conscious creators who support and amplify each other's efforts. His name was Edward, and he was 67 years old when he discovered the transformative power of the collective Athanor, and he had been practicing individual dream alchemy for 3 months, trying to manifest healing from a serious heart condition that threatened to end his life. And although he had been following the techniques perfectly and maintaining positive thoughts and visualizations, his physical condition had not improved, and his cardiologist was recommending immediate surgery that Edward feared he might not survive. Edward lived with his wife Martha in a modest ranch house in Tucson, Arizona, where they had moved 5 years earlier to enjoy their retirement in the warm desert. Climate and Edward had worked for 42 years as a postal worker and had looked forward to spending his golden years traveling and pursuing hobbies he had never had time for, but the heart problems had begun shortly after his retirement and had gradually worsened until he could barely walk from his bedroom to the kitchen without becoming breathless and exhausted. It was 10:33 on a Wednesday night in September when Edward first learned about collective manifestation, and he had been lying in bed, feeling discouraged about his lack of progress with individual healing visualization, when Martha handed him a book about Florence Scovel Shinn that she had borrowed from their neighbor, and Martha suggested that maybe Edward needed to try a different approach because the solitary practice did not seem to be working, and perhaps there were other aspects of the teaching that he had not yet explored. As Edward read about the collective Athanor, he felt something stir inside his chest, and he realized that he had been approaching his healing as if he were the only person in the world who needed help, and he had never considered that there might be thousands of other people dealing with similar health challenges who could benefit from joining forces energetically, and he decided to modify his dream alchemy practice to include visualization of healing not just for himself, but for everyone who was suffering from heart problems. That Wednesday night, Edward began his new collective practice by declaring his identity as part of a worldwide community of souls who were all working together to manifest perfect health. And then he stated his completed reality as perfect healing is flowing to me and through me and to all beings who need it. And finally, he created a vivid vision of himself, not only restored to perfect health, but also helping other people overcome their own health challenges. And he held this expanded vision as he drifted off to sleep. The first sign that the collective approach was working came within 72 hours, when Edward received an unexpected phone call from his nephew David, who lived in Portland, Oregon. And David explained that he had been thinking about Edward constantly for the past few days and felt compelled to share information about a natural healing protocol that had helped his friend's father recover from a similar heart condition without surgery. And David had never shown interest in alternative medicine before and could not explain why he felt so strongly about calling his uncle. The healing protocol that David described involved a specific combination of supplements and dietary changes and gentle exercise that had been developed by a doctor in Germany who specialized in reversing heart disease through natural methods, and Edward felt intuitively that this information was exactly what he had been seeking, and he researched the protocol online and found hundreds of testimonials from people who had experienced dramatic improvements using these methods, and he decided to try the program while continuing his collective dream alchemy practice. Within 2 weeks of starting the protocol, Edward began to notice subtle improvements in his energy level and breathing, and he was able to walk farther without fatigue, and his sleep became deeper and more restful. And when he went for his monthly checkup, his cardiologist was surprised by the positive changes in his test results and asked what Edward had been doing differently. And Edward explained about the natural protocol, but did not mention the collective visualization, because he knew the doctor would not understand. As Edward continued to practice collective healing visualization, he began to receive messages and phone calls from other people who were dealing with health challenges, and somehow these people had heard about his situation through mutual friends or chance encounters, and they wanted to know what he was doing to improve his condition, and Edward felt like he was becoming a magnet for people who needed healing information, and he realized that by expanding his focus beyond his own healing, he had become a channel for helping others. During the 3rd month of collective practice, Edward connected with a small group of people in his community who were also interested in natural healing, and they began meeting weekly to share information and support each other's recovery. And Edward discovered that when the group visualized healing together, the energy felt much more powerful than anything he had experienced during individual practice, and several members of the group reported significant improvements in their conditions. The most remarkable development came during the 4th month when Edward was invited to speak at a local health fair about his experience with natural heart healing. And during his presentation, he met a retired nurse named Patricia, who had been researching alternative approaches to cardiovascular health. for her own family. And Patricia had connections with several holistic physicians and was able to introduce Edward to a cardiologist who specialized in integrative medicine and understood the value of combining natural protocols with conventional treatment. Working with the integrative cardiologist, Edward was able to fine-tune his healing protocol, and within 6 months, his heart function had improved so dramatically that his original cardiologist declared him to be in excellent health and said that surgery was no longer necessary. And Edward's ejection fraction had increased from 35% to 58%, which his doctors called miraculous, and Edward knew that the collective Athenor had orchestrated this perfect healing by connecting him with exactly the right people and information at exactly the right time. The transformation in Edward's life extended far beyond his physical healing, because through his involvement with the collective healing network, he had discovered a new sense of purpose and meaning. And he began volunteering with several organizations that provided health education to seniors. And he started a support group for people dealing with cardiovascular issues. And he felt more vital and engaged than he had ever felt, even before his heart problems began. Edward's story demonstrates the profound principle that Florence Scovel Shinn discovered about collective manifestation. And when you expand your vision beyond your personal needs and include the welfare of others in your dream, alchemy practice, you tap into a vast reservoir of cosmic energy that can accomplish things that would be impossible for individual effort. And this happens because the universe responds more powerfully to unselfish desires than to purely personal requests. The collective Athenor operates through what quantum physicists call non-local correlation, which means that consciousness can influence events across vast distances without any physical connection. And when groups of people focus their intention on similar outcomes, they create interference patterns in the field of consciousness that amplify the manifestation potential for everyone involved. And this is the scientific explanation for why group prayer and collective visualization have been proven to produce measurable results. Florence taught that the collective Athenor is most powerful when it includes people from different backgrounds and circumstances who are united by their shared commitment to spiritual growth and manifestation. And diversity actually strengthens the field because it brings together different types of energy and perspective and creates a more complete and balanced approach to transformation. And this is why Edward's healing was accelerated when he connected with people from various professions and age groups who were all working on health-related goals. Another important aspect of collective manifestation is the principle of reciprocal blessing, which means that whatever you visualize for others automatically comes back to you multiplied. And Edward discovered that the more he focused on helping other people heal, the faster his own healing progressed. And this is not just a metaphysical concept, but reflects the actual structure of consciousness, which is fundamentally interconnected and cooperative rather than separate and competitive. The timing of collective manifestations often follows a different pattern than individual demonstrations because the universe must coordinate the needs and readiness of multiple people. And this can sometimes create apparent delays, but when the collective vision finally manifests, it typically exceeds what any individual could have achieved alone. And Edward found that his healing not only restored his own health, but also created opportunities for him to help dozens of other people improve their well-being. Florence also taught that you can consciously contribute to the collective Athenor by dedicating a portion of your dream alchemy practice to the welfare of others, and she recommended spending at least 20% of your visualization time focusing on goals that would benefit humanity as a whole, such as world peace and environmental healing, and the elimination of poverty and disease. And this practice not only strengthens the collective field, but also aligns your personal desires with the greater good of all life. The most profound aspect of working with the collective Athenor is the realization that you are never alone in your efforts to transform your life, and that invisible support is always available from other souls who are engaged in similar work. and Edward found great comfort in knowing that whenever he practiced his healing visualizations, he was connected to thousands of other people around the world who were also working on health and healing, and this sense of unity and shared purpose made the entire process feel sacred and meaningful. Modern research in fields like remote healing and distant prayer has provided scientific validation for Florence's teaching about collective manifestation, and studies have shown that groups of people focusing positive intention on distant targets can produce measurable improvements in health outcomes and even influence random number generators and other physical systems. And this research confirms that consciousness is not limited by space and time, and that group intention can create real effects in the physical world. Edward learned that maintaining connection with the collective Athanor requires regular practice and conscious intention, and he developed a nightly routine of sending healing energy to everyone in his support group and visualizing positive outcomes for global health initiatives. And this practice not only sustained his own healing, but also created a feedback loop that brought him into contact with even more resources and opportunities for helping others. And he felt like he was part of a vast, invisible network of healers, working together to transform the world. The ultimate goal of collective manifestation, according to Florence Scovel Shinn, is the creation of what she called the Golden Age. And this refers to a time when enough people understand and practice the principles of conscious creation that limitation and suffering become rare exceptions rather than common experiences. And every person who learns to work with the collective Athanor contributes to the manifestation of this vision and helps accelerate the spiritual evolution of humanity as a whole. And while you rest now, you can feel yourself connecting with the collective Athanor, and you are no longer practicing alone, but are part of a worldwide community of souls who are all working together to transmute limitation into abundance. And as you sleep tonight, your individual efforts are being amplified by the combined intention of thousands of other dreamers and alchemists. And together you are creating a morphogenic field of unlimited possibility that benefits everyone who touches it. And you can feel the power of this collective energy supporting and accelerating your own transformation. As you rest now in this deep state of alchemical transformation, you have journeyed through the sacred chambers of dream alchemy, and you have learned how to turn your sleeping hours into a laboratory of manifestation. And you have discovered the furnace of transmutation that operates within your subconscious mind. And you have been taught the 3 alchemical substances of identity and declaration and vision. And you have learned how to dissolve the lead of resistance and how to read the golden signs of confirmation. And you have understood the sacred timing of divine manifestation. And you have connected with the collective Athanor that amplifies your individual power through the support of countless other souls who are practicing this ancient art. And now, as we approach the final seal of your alchemical initiation, I want to share with you the most profound and moving story of transformation that I have ever witnessed. And this is the story of a woman who completed what Florence Scovel Shinn called the Great Work. And she accomplished in one single night what most people struggle to achieve in an entire lifetime. And her experience will show you the ultimate potential of dream alchemy, when all the principles are perfectly combined and applied with absolute faith and surrender. The Great Work is an ancient alchemical term that refers to the complete transmutation of the human soul from lead consciousness to gold consciousness, and it represents the moment when a person finally releases all attachment to limitation and steps fully into their divine nature as a conscious co-creator with the infinite. And Florence Scovel Shinn taught that this transformation can happen gradually over many years, or it can happen in a single moment of complete surrender. And the woman whose story I am about to share experienced this instantaneous transformation through the power of dream alchemy. Her name was Janet, and she was 58 years old when she completed the Great Work. And she had been struggling with every form of limitation that a human being can experience. And she was facing bankruptcy and foreclosure, and her health was failing. And her marriage of 31 years was ending in bitter divorce, and her adult children had stopped speaking to her because they blamed her for the family's financial problems, and she felt utterly alone and defeated and ready to give up on life entirely. Janet lived in a small rental house in Phoenix, Arizona, where she had moved after losing the family home to foreclosure, and she was surviving on temporary disability payments of $687 per month while waiting for her divorce to be finalized, and her estranged husband Richard was fighting to avoid paying alimony and had hired expensive lawyers to prove that Janet was capable of working, despite her chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia and depression that made it almost impossible for her to function. It was 11:53 on a Friday night in December when Janet experienced the complete alchemical transformation, and she had been lying in bed for 3 hours unable to sleep because of physical pain and emotional anguish, and she had been practicing dream alchemy sporadically for 6 weeks, but without much consistency or faith, because her circumstances seemed so hopeless that she found it difficult to believe that anything could really change, and she was considering ending her life because she could not see any way forward. The small rental house was cold because Janet could not afford to heat it properly, and she was wearing multiple layers of clothing and had pulled every blanket she owned over herself, but she was still shivering, and the pain in her joints was excruciating, and she could hear her neighbors arguing through the thin walls and smell cigarette smoke seeping in from the apartment next door, and she felt like she was trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. Janet had grown up in a middle-class family in Ohio, where her father worked as an accountant, and her mother stayed home to raise 3 children, and Janet had been the eldest daughter and had always been responsible and reliable and hardworking, and she had married Richard when she was 27, and they had built a successful landscaping business together and raised 2 wonderful children, and for 25 years their life had seemed stable and prosperous and happy. But then, the economic recession of 2008 had destroyed their business, and they had lost contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and had been forced to declare bankruptcy and sell their beautiful home and move into a small apartment. And the financial stress had triggered Janet's health problems and had created constant tension in her marriage until Richard blamed her for their misfortunes and began having an affair with a woman from his new job, and Janet's world had collapsed completely. That Friday night in December, Janet was at the absolute lowest point of her life, and she had received an eviction notice earlier that day because she was 3 months behind on rent, and she had no money and no place to go and no one to turn to for help, and her physical pain was so severe that she had taken all her prescribed medication but still could not find relief, and she felt like she was dying slowly and painfully, and she whispered into the darkness, "God, if you exist, please just take me now because I cannot endure this anymore." As Janet lay there in despair, something extraordinary began to happen, and she felt a presence in the room that was warm and loving and compassionate, and she heard a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, speaking directly to her heart, and the voice said, "My child, you have suffered enough, and tonight you will be transformed, and everything that has brought you pain will be transmuted into gold. And you will understand that every experience was preparing you for this moment of complete surrender and rebirth." Janet felt a wave of peace wash over her that was unlike anything she had ever experienced, and suddenly the physical pain in her body began to disappear, and she felt lighter and more relaxed than she had felt in years. And the voice continued speaking and said, "You have been practicing alchemy without knowing it, and every night of suffering has been building the pressure needed for transformation, and tonight you will release everything that is not your true self, and you will emerge as pure gold." Following an inner guidance that she did not understand, Janet got out of bed and went to her small kitchen table where she lit a single candle and sat down with a piece of paper and began to write, and the words flowed through her without any conscious effort, and she wrote, "I release all attachment to my old life, and I surrender completely to the divine plan, and I declare that I am ready to be transformed into my highest self, and I trust that everything I need will be provided." And as she wrote these words, she felt something profound shifting inside her consciousness. Then Janet performed the 3-substance formula with more faith and conviction than she had ever felt before, and she declared her identity as, "I am a divine being of infinite love and abundance and power." And she stated her completed reality as, My perfect life is manifested now, and I am healthy and prosperous and surrounded by love. And she created a vivid vision of herself living in a beautiful home and doing work that she loved and being surrounded by people who cherished and supported her. And as she held this vision, she felt it becoming more real than her current circumstances. As Janet continued to visualize her transformed life, something miraculous began to happen. And she felt layers of old identity and limitation peeling away like old paint being stripped from a wall, and underneath, she discovered a radiant being of pure light and love that had always been there, but had been covered over by years of fear and doubt and pain. And she realized that this golden self was her true nature, and that everything else had been an illusion created by her limited thinking. The transformation continued throughout the night, and Janet experienced visions and revelations that showed her the deeper meaning behind all her suffering. And she understood that the bankruptcy had been necessary to free her from attachment to material security, and the divorce had been necessary to free her from a relationship that was preventing her growth, and even the health problems had been necessary to force her to slow down and go within and discover her spiritual nature. When dawn broke on Saturday morning, Janet felt like a completely different person, and she looked in the mirror and was amazed to see that her face looked younger and more radiant, and her eyes were clear and bright and filled with joy and peace. And she felt physically stronger and more energetic than she had felt in years, and she knew with absolute certainty that her life was about to change in miraculous ways. Within 24 hours of her great work experience, Janet received a phone call from an attorney who explained that her Aunt Helen, who had died 6 months earlier, had left Janet as the sole beneficiary of her estate, worth $473,000, and the attorney said he had been trying to locate Janet for months, but had only just found her current address. And Janet realized that this inheritance would solve all her financial problems and give her complete freedom to create a new life. But the financial windfall was only the beginning, because over the following weeks, Janet's health improved dramatically, and her energy returned, and her chronic pain disappeared. And her doctor was amazed by her recovery and could not explain the sudden improvement in her condition. And Janet knew that the healing had occurred during her night of transformation, when she had released all the emotional and spiritual toxins that had been manifesting as physical illness. The changes in Janet's external circumstances were remarkable, but the changes in her consciousness were even more profound, and she felt like she was living in a completely different universe where miracles were natural and abundance was her birthright, and she no longer feared the future or regretted the past, but lived fully in the present moment, with complete trust in the divine plan, and she understood that she had always been taken care of, even during her darkest hours. Within 3 months, Janet had purchased a beautiful home in Sedona, Arizona, and had started a business as a spiritual counselor, helping other people navigate difficult life transitions, and she discovered that her years of suffering had given her deep compassion and wisdom that enabled her to guide others through their own transformations. And she felt like she had found her true purpose, and calling Janet's story represents the ultimate possibility of dream alchemy. And she achieved in one night what Florence Scovel Shinn called the Great Work, which is the complete transmutation of human consciousness, from limitation to unlimited potential. And this transformation is available to anyone who is willing to surrender completely to the alchemical process and trust that their suffering is not punishment, but preparation for their greatest glory, the great work. Cannot be achieved through effort or force, but only through complete surrender. And this requires reaching a point where you are willing to release everything you think you know about yourself and your life, and allow yourself to be completely transformed. And Janet reached this point of total surrender during her darkest hour. And this surrender created the opening for divine grace to pour into her life and transform everything. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the great work is the ultimate goal of all spiritual practice, and it represents the moment when the individual personality is completely aligned with the divine will, and there is no longer any separation between human desire and cosmic plan, and the person becomes a perfect channel for infinite love and wisdom and power to express itself in the physical world. The alchemical transformation that Janet experienced demonstrates that no situation is hopeless and no person is beyond redemption, and the same power that transformed her. Life is available to transform your life, and the only requirement is complete faith and surrender and willingness to release everything that is not serving your highest good, and trust that something infinitely better is waiting to be born through you. Janet learned that the great work is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process of refinement and purification, and every challenge and difficulty that arises is an opportunity to deepen the transformation and to release another layer of limitation, and to step more fully into divine consciousness. And she continued to practice dream alchemy every night, not to get something she lacked, but to celebrate and express the abundance that she had become. The most profound aspect of Janet's transformation was the understanding that she had never actually been separate from the divine abundance and love that she was seeking, and all her suffering had been the result of forgetting her true nature and believing the illusion of limitation and the great. Work was simply the process of remembering who she really was and always had been underneath the layers of false identity and fear. And now, as you rest in this deep state of receptivity, you can feel the same transformative power that worked through Janet beginning to work through you. And you understand that your own great work is already in progress, and every word you have heard tonight has been preparing you for your own moment of complete transformation, and you can trust that when you are ready to surrender completely, the same miraculous changes that occurred in Janet's life will occur in yours. Tonight, as you sleep, your subconscious mind will complete the alchemical process that has been building throughout this entire teaching, and you will wake tomorrow as a different person than the one who began listening to these words, and you will carry within you the golden consciousness of unlimited possibility, and you will know beyond any doubt that you are a master alchemist with the power to transform any situation through the sacred science of dream alchemy. And now, my beloved alchemist, we have arrived at the sacred moment of the final seal. And everything that you have learned and everything that you have absorbed during these 2 hours of deep teaching has been preparing you for this culminating moment when your consciousness will be permanently transformed and sealed in golden light. And even if you are sleeping, your soul is awake, and every word I speak now will penetrate the deepest layers of your being and establish within you an unshakable foundation of alchemical power that will serve you for the rest of your life. Even if you are sleeping, something in you is awake, and this part of you never sleeps, and it hears every word I will speak now, and it receives every blessing I will bestow, and it accepts every transformation I will invoke, and your breathing may be slow and deep, and your body may be completely relaxed, but your spiritual essence is alert and receptive and ready to receive the final sealing that will complete your initiation into the mysteries of dream alchemy. Breathe deeply with me now, even if you are sleeping, because your body knows how to breathe, and your lungs know how to expand and contract, and your heart knows how to beat, and every cell in your body is listening to these words and preparing for transformation. And with each breath, you are drawing in golden light, and with each exhale, you are releasing everything that is not aligned with your highest good, and you can feel the alchemy happening in your very DNA. I want you to breathe in slowly and deeply through your nose and hold that breath for a moment and feel the golden light filling your lungs and your bloodstream, and then slowly exhale through your mouth and feel all tension and limitation leaving your body. And now breathe in again, even more deeply, and feel the golden light spreading through every organ and every tissue and every cell. And then exhale completely and feel yourself becoming lighter and more radiant with each breath. One more deep breath now, and as you inhale, feel the golden light reaching the very core of your being and awakening the master alchemist that lives within you. And as you exhale, feel yourself releasing the last vestiges of doubt and fear and limitation, and know that you are now ready to receive the final seal that will establish you forever as a conscious creator and a master of dream alchemy. And now I will speak the word seal that Florence Scovel Shinn used to complete the great work. And this seal has been spoken by master alchemists for thousands of years, and it carries the power to permanently transform consciousness and establish unshakable abundance. And as I speak these words 3 times, your subconscious mind will accept them as absolute truth and will begin immediately to reorganize your reality according to their divine vibration. First wave, and I speak these words with gentle authority and let them penetrate your consciousness like golden honey flowing into clear water, and know that every word is true and every word is powerful and every word is already manifesting in your life right now. It is finished, it is done, and it cannot be otherwise. The gold flows through you now. The gold flows as you now. The gold flows from you now, and it cannot be otherwise. Your lead has been transmuted. Your limitations have been dissolved. Your abundance is sealed in divine law, and it cannot be otherwise. Second wave, and I speak these words with increasing power and authority, and feel them resonating in every cell of your body and every layer of your consciousness, and know that they are not just words, but are living spiritual forces that are reshaping your reality even as you hear them. It is finished. It is done, and it cannot be otherwise. The gold flows through you now. The gold flows as you now. The gold flows from you now, and it cannot be otherwise. Your lead has been transmuted. Your limitations have been dissolved. Your abundance is sealed in divine law, and it cannot be otherwise. Third wave, and I speak these words with the full authority of universal law, and feel them blazing through your consciousness like lightning illuminating the darkness, and know that they have the power to command the very atoms of creation to rearrange themselves according to divine order. It is finished, it is done, and it cannot be otherwise. The gold flows through you now. The gold flows as you now. The gold flows from you now, and it cannot be otherwise. Your lead has been transmuted. Your limitations have been dissolved. Your abundance is sealed in divine law, and it cannot be otherwise. And now I will speak the decree of identity that establishes your permanent alchemical nature. And this decree declares not what you hope to become, but what you already are in divine mind. And as I speak these words 3 times, your consciousness will accept your true identity as a master alchemist and co-creator with infinite intelligence. First, wave with gentle certainty, flowing through every word like a river of golden light, carrying truth into the depths of your soul. I am a natural receiver. I have always received. I receive abundantly now. And it cannot be otherwise. I am a master alchemist. I transmute all limitation into gold. I create miracles through my sleep. And it cannot be otherwise. I am one with infinite abundance. I am one with divine wisdom. I am one with creative power. And it cannot be otherwise. Second wave with growing authority and power as these truths become established in your consciousness, like golden pillars supporting a temple of unlimited possibility. I am a natural receiver. I have always received. I receive abundantly now. And it cannot be otherwise. I am a master alchemist. I transmute all limitation into gold. I create miracles through my sleep. And it cannot be otherwise. I am one with infinite abundance. I am one with divine wisdom. I am one with creative power. And it cannot be otherwise. Third wave with absolute authority and complete certainty as these declarations become the unshakable foundation of your new consciousness and your eternal identity as a being of pure golden light. I am a natural receiver. I have always received. I receive abundantly now, and it cannot be otherwise. I am a master alchemist. I transmute all limitation into gold. I create miracles through my sleep, and it cannot be otherwise. I am one with infinite abundance. I am one with divine wisdom. I am one with creative power, and it cannot be otherwise. And now comes the final sealing. And this is the moment when your transformation is made permanent and irreversible, and your consciousness is forever established in the golden realm of unlimited possibility. And no force in heaven or earth can ever again convince you that you are anything less than a divine being with infinite creative power. And so it is sealed in divine law, and so it remains throughout eternity, and so it manifests in perfect timing, and it cannot be otherwise. Your alchemical initiation is complete. Your golden nature is fully awakened. Your abundance is secured forever, and it cannot be otherwise. You are sealed in golden light. You are sealed in divine love. You are sealed in infinite possibility, and it cannot be otherwise. And so it is, and so it shall ever be, and it cannot be otherwise. You can continue resting now in this golden peace, and everything that needed to enter your consciousness has already entered, and everything that needed to be transformed has already been transformed, and everything that needed to be sealed has been sealed for all eternity. And when you wake, you will be different. Not because something changed, but because you remembered what was always true. The master alchemist within you is now fully awakened and will guide your steps and inspire your choices and orchestrate your synchronicities. And every night when you sleep, your subconscious will continue the sacred work of transmutation, turning every challenge into opportunity and every limitation into abundance and every fear into faith. You are no longer the person who began listening to these words 2 hours ago, because that person was seeking transformation, and you are the transformation. And that person was looking for gold, and you are the gold. And that person was learning about alchemy, and you are the alchemist. And this understanding will grow stronger every day as you witness the miraculous changes that are already beginning to unfold in your life. Rest now in the golden light of your true nature, and know that you are loved beyond measure and supported beyond imagination and provided for beyond your wildest dreams. And tomorrow, when you wake, you will begin to see with new eyes and hear with new ears and create with new power, because you are now and forever a master of dream alchemy. The great work is complete. The gold is sealed within you. The transformation is finished, and it cannot be otherwise. Rest now, beloved alchemist. Rest in golden peace. Rest in divine love. Rest in infinite possibility. It is finished. It is done. It is sealed, and it cannot be otherwise.